Whoop whoop! G'day, Stu from UAVfutures here, and today, well, we're going to be building this! Now, this is going to be the ultimate indoor FPV quad. So this is the Owl from Flex RC. We're going to be building the DIY kit, putting it together and slapping in some FPV gear. And the reason this thing is so awesome, it's a great little size, and it's also got these awesome propeller guards and things like that. It can carry a GoPro, but you can smash this thing around inside, bouncing it off walls and cupboards and small children and animals and things like that. Maybe don't do that. But yeah, definitely a great indoor fly. We're going to be building it here, so let's get started. Alright, so let's have a look at everything you need to make your ultimate indoor fly. Now, a lot of these components I'm using because I got a kit from Flex RC and some of the FPV gear I've sourced myself. Anyway, for a frame, we are using the Owl, which is fantastic, and we're going to talk about all these in detail in a minute. We're going to be using the Owl. We're going to have you're going to need 4 motors, 4 ESCs, a PDB, a receiver, a flight controller. For FPV, you're going to need your VTX, a pigtail, an antenna, and a camera. We're going to be rocking some 3-inch tri-blade props, and you're also going to need like an XT30 or an XT60 depending on your battery, as well as some little different bits of gauges of wire and things like that. Anyway, we'll talk about all these in detail a bit more when we get to each part, but let's get started and we'll talk about the frame. Alrighty, so the frame we're going to be using is the Owl, and this is from Flex RC, and this is great for an indoor flyer for a few reasons. Number one, you can configure it in a few different ways, and I've got a review just here that you can watch if you want to check out why I think this frame is so good. But you can configure it in a few different ways and put your FPV gear in a certain way and have it either as a pusher or a puller, which is really important because we're going to be building a pusher quad just here. And the main thing though is it's got these big cutouts just here, and that is to protect your motors and your propellers when you're flying around. So we're going to be able to bump this thing around like Dodgem cars, bump it into the wall, the TV, anything like that, obviously trying to be safe, but and we shouldn't be damaging the house or our quad, and it's not going to crash as well. It should just be able to bump off and keep flying. So I'm really excited about that. Alrighty, so that's the frame, and just remember when I'm talking, this is actually going to be the bottom because the quad is going to be flipped over this way. So it's going to be a little bit tricky to work on, but just keep that in mind. Alrighty, so we're going to need to solder up our PDB to put inside the frame. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through and I'm going to pre-tin all these little pads in here, so to make our soldering jobs a lot easier when it comes to joining our wires to it. Now this is an awesome little PDB because it's got everything we sort of need here. It's got 12 volts and 5 volts. It's got a place to put our battery in, and then it's got our 4 pads for our ESCs. So I'm just going to go through and solder those up now, just putting the solder on each one. Alrighty, so there's our PDB pre-tinned. Now normally when I mount these frames I put them on a little standoff and stuff like that, and when I'm mounting the PDB, and that just stops it from shorting out. But I don't have the luxury in this frame because it is a pretty tight little build in terms of the middle sort of stack that you have. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get one of these little screws, put it through, and to stop it shorting on the carbon, I'm just going to cover the bottom in electrical tape. Just like that, and then I'm just going to trim around the outside. So there it is. This is how I'm going to secure my PDB just right here, and we're going to put that on our frame right now. So there it is, and then I'm just going to make some little holes for the screws to go through. Looking good. Alright, and now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some little plastic screws and secure my PDB to my frame, and that's going to make soldering and things like that a lot easier because we'll be able to measure up nicely. So little plastic screws through here into the frame, and then I'm going to screw my little standoff down on top of them. 1 and putting 4 in. Alright, there we are. Our little PDB secured and ready to be soldered straight to. So let's start measuring up our ESC and our motors. Now the motors we're going to be using are these DYS 1306 4000 kV motors, and they're going to be great because not only are they going to be able to spin really fast, but they're going to be able to handle 3-cell, and if you want to go a bit insane, you can also do 4-cell as well. So they're going to have plenty of power on our such small props and keep our profile nice and small. So I'm going to screw all 4 of these motors in, remembering that these are going to be upside down when the quad is finished. Alrighty, so here it is. I've got my 4 motors screwed in, and I didn't use any Loctite on these just yet, but make sure before you go around flying you do put Loctite on, but I've just put them in there sort of firmly but not overly tight in case we need to take them out or anything like that. That's a good little tip. So motors are in there. Let's talk about our ESCs. And speaking of the ESCs, we're going to be running these DYS XM 20 amp ESCs. Now the reason I really like these, well, they can take 3 and 4S LiPos, which is going to be great. But it's got these solder pads right here. Now traditionally on things like the Little Bees and stuff, what we've had to do, people have been cutting the heat shrink off, taking these wires off and then resoldering their own ones back on. But right here we don't have to do any of that stuff because it's already got the solder pads right there and ready. So what we're going to do, we're going to pre-tin these the same way that we pre-tinned our PDB. So we'll just put it down and put a little bit of solder on there and they'll be ready to attach to our motors. Alright, so they're all pre-tinned. Let's hook them up to our motors. Alright, so we're just about to connect our ESCs and hook them up to our motors, but just before we do, like I remembered, we're going to put our battery strap in. So I'll leave a little note in the previous thing before, but yeah, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to just take off these little screws before we solder them down, and I'm going to slide the battery strap in. And then I'm also thinking we should probably do making our XT30 or XT60 or whatever your battery connector, we'll put that on here so we can keep that nice and clean before we put on all these wires and things like that, and things start to get a little bit more complicated. Alright, so we've got our battery strap in, and now what we need to do is make our actual battery connector, so the part that's going to connect to the XT30 or XT60 or something like that. So I'm going to cut 2 lengths of wire and pre-tin each end, and then we're going to hook it up to the board. Now you can use black and red or just black. I'm going to use just black because I like the look, but just make sure you know exactly what wire is what. Alright, so I've cut my 2 lengths of wire and now I'm just going to strip each end a little bit because we'll need to pre-tin them ready for soldering. Alrighty. And we'll just pre-tin them. Alright, so now what we want to do, you want to solder the wires to the voltage in, I guess, or the battery pads on the PDB that you're using. So I'm going to do that right now, right here. And now I'm just going to thread them through this awesome little hole just here. It's on the other side of the frame. Alright, so I've got them threaded through just here, and what I'll be able to do, I'll be able to zip tie that down or put it wherever I like and cut it and put my connector on the end. And that's going to change depending if you're using an XT30 or an XT60 or the size of the battery that you're going to be flying with. So I'm going to leave that to the end because we can always change that or whatever we like when we're finished with the build. But let's get on to the ESCs again. Now before we solder these up to our ESCs, these wires are way too long to sort of be hooking them up like that. So what we need to do, we're going to trim every single one of these wires and sort of strip the end and pre-tin it ready to solder up to our ESC. So I'm going to probably give myself about 1 centimeter of slack. So I'm going to give myself about 10 millimeters, going to cut them, and that's going to make it look a lot tidier and shed a lot of weight as well. So we'll cut to that right here and it'll look like this. Alright, so there we go, that's a bit clean. I've cut all my wires off, and what we're going to do, we're going to go around and we're going to pre-tin each one of these, and it'll make it a lot easier when we solder it to our ESC pads. So we're just going to pre-tin each one of the ends of these motor wires. There we go. So now our next step is going to be to solder in our ESCs, but just before we do, I don't want any of these pads underneath my ESCs to cause any shorts or anything like that on the carbon. So what I'm going to do, and look, you don't have to do this step, it's just a little precaution that I'm going to take, and it's going to add barely anything. I'm just going to put in a small piece of electrical tape just underneath the arms, just here where the ESCs will be mounted, and that's really going to help when it comes to reducing the chance of a short. Even if it happens in a crash or something like that, I still really think it's a good idea. So you don't have to do that, but that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to cut to when I've got the tape on the arms, and we'll see what she looks like. So there it is, there's the electrical tape, you can barely tell it's on it. Alright, so let's put in our ESCs. Right now when we're actually soldering in our ESCs, all I'm going to do is I'm going to put the pad up and we're just going to solder them straight across. And if you're not happy with the direction that the motor's spinning, because 2 of these are going to need to spin clockwise and 2 are going to need to spin anti-clockwise or counterclockwise, what you're going to need to do is just switch over any 2 of the wires there and it will reverse the direction of the motor. Or you can do it on the software side of things in the BL Heli suite as well. Alright, so there's one done. Let's do that to all 4 and we'll have a look what she looks like. Alrighty, so there it is. There's all 4 ESCs on here, looking nice and pretty. And to keep these things nice and clean, I'm actually going to tape them down to sort of stop them moving. So I'm just going to use a little bit of electrical tape again, just run it over that and the arm just here. You could use a zip tie, but I think this is lighter, and because it's an indoor quad, this is going to be a better option. Alrighty, now here she is, and you'll notice I've tried to move all the yellow and the signal wires out of the way and things like that. Now what we need to do, and this is probably the most difficult part of the build, is we're going to solder in our positive and ground terminals to our PDB. So you notice the PDB in here, it's got some positive and also some ground terminals just here, so we need to match each one of those up to its closest corresponding pad. So there's one here, and then there's also 2 on this side. So it's going to be a little bit tricky, but what we're going to do, we're going to measure them, cut our wires at the right length, or we're going to use some wire cutters, wherever they are. Cut our wires at the right length, strip them back, and then we're going to solder them, pre-tin them and solder them down. Alright, so I'm going to cut all my wires and find out how long I need and show you what it looks like on my quad. Alrighty, so I've cut all my wires, and if you really do make a mistake and you find you've cut one too short or something, what you're going to have to do, it's not too much of a big deal, just going to have to take off this heat shrink just here on your ESC and peel it back and solder in a new wire. So that's all it is, but hopefully I've done mine at the right lengths. Now I'm going to strip the ends of all the little positive and ground wires that I've cut, and then we'll start soldering. We'll pre-tin them and solder them in. There we go. Now it's time to, ow, that's still hot. Alright, there we go. Now it's time to hook them up to our pads in here, so our positive and our negative pads. And I'm probably going to start with the most difficult one in here. So pick the one you think is the most cramped or has the least amount of space and work from there. So for me, this side of the board seems a lot easier than this one over here. Alright, so here it is with most of the ESC wires in, and I just want to point out, it doesn't matter, like say for your ground wire on this ESC, it doesn't matter if you ground it to this ground pad or to this one, or if you round it over to here, as long as it's being grounded somewhere, and it's the same with the positive as well. And I've just left this positive off just here, because I want to solder in our power wires for our FPV setup, and also for our flight controller. Alright, so we've got these 5 volts here, so I'm just going to solder in 2 little wires, and that's going to be the 5 volts that will power our flight controller. So I'm just going to solder that in right here, and that's why I haven't put this positive lead down as well, because it's going to make it a lot easier just to solder this in when that's not in the way. There's that one, and now I'm just going to put in my ground. There we go, looking good. And now we're going to do the same with whatever you're going to power your VTX with. So I've got my VTX little wires here, so we're going to solder those in. And now it's probably a good time to put that last little positive of the ESC wire back on as well. So there we go. So that's pretty much it for soldering to our PDB. The only thing we do need to hook up is these ground wires from the ESC. So that's going to be our next step, but it's looking pretty good. So let's keep going. Now, depending how you're going to hook up your flight controller and things like that, you've got a couple of options here. You can either put your pins in and then you can slide these over the ends and things like that. But we're not going to do that because this is a pretty tight little build. So on this build, what we're going to do, we're going to cut, this is the signal wire and the ground wire. So the signal wire is this yellow wire that you see here, and the ground wire is the black one. What we're going to do, we're going to probably cut it with about 10 centimeters. So this is going to be plenty of spare. So I'm going to cut them all to about that length. And then we're going to connect all the ground wires from the ESC up to the PDB, and that'll be the last bit of soldering directly to the PDB that we'll need to do. Alrighty, so let's just unwind these, and at the moment we're just interested in the black cords, or the grounding cords right there. Wires called. So I've just unwound them all, and pretty much all you want to do is take all these little ESC ground wires, the black ones just here, and if you remember, I left a spare ground terminal pad just here. I'm just going to cut them, pre-tin them, and solder them all down. So if you've kept up this far, you should be able to do this step. So let's have a look at what it looks like when it's done. Close to the end. Alright, so a pretty exciting part, and that is mounting the flight controller, and that's going to be sitting on our build just like this, and remember that that is going to be upside down. But in order to do that, first we need to connect our signal cables to ports 1, 2, 3 and 4, and also hook up our 5 volts so we can power the thing. Alrighty, first things first, because we're going to be hooking up to these ports just across the front here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, we're going to solder those in, and then I'm also going to solder in a little positive and negative just here so we can power the thing. So let's just quickly pre-tin these. You could use some pins or something like that. I'm just going to use a little bit of solder and directly solder to them. Sorry, so there's the things, the ESCs, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then let's give it a bit of power, say at 5, below 5 and 6. So the middle one is the positive and the bottom one's the ground. Alright, so now we need to hook these up to the corresponding motors. Alright, so let's do motor 1, which is going to be this one just here. So I'm going to hook this up to 1. So there's 1. Let's do motor 2. And we're going to do the same so follow the same process for 3 and 4 and then get back to you. So now we've done that, we hooked up our 4 ESC signal wires. We also just need to power our board, and that's going to be with this little 5 volt we've soldered in just before to the PDB. So we're going to hook this up, this one just here. This is going to be the 5 volt power, so we're going to hook that up to the middle rail, and this one just here, this is going to be the ground, so we're going to ground our flight controller. Might help to use a little bit of blue tack or something like that in one of these situations as well. Awesome. Now before I go any further, what I want to do, I'm going to hit all of these little joints with a bit of hot glue, and that's really going to help and stop them snapping off in the vibrations and things and the bumps that this thing has around the house. Alrighty. So I've glued all those down. Let's move on to putting in our receiver. Now the receiver I got from Flex RC is this Lemon RX satellite, and this is a great little receiver. It's super light, and I think it does a fantastic job in this sort of micro size sort of quads. And the way we're going to power this, because we're using this flight controller, this F3 flight controller, you can only get some of these cords when you get it, when you open it up. Now what you're going to do, you need to pretty much take all these sort of wires out and things like that, and the only things you want is the ground and the signal wire, because that's what we need here. The only other thing we need to do is feed this some 3 volts, and this doesn't actually put out 3 volts where we plug it in, so there's a tiny little pad on the back side of the flight controller here that says 3 volts. That's where we're going to power our receiver from. Alright, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pre-tin this 3 volt pad right here. There we go. And I'm just going to hook up the positive, the 3.3 volt sort of the power wire just here to the receiver. Then we can put our flight controller down, it'll be all nice and neat, and make it a lot easier when we work on the rest of it. Alright, that looks great. Let's screw our flight controller down and then get on with the rest of the build. There we go, that's looking a bit better. So we've got our receiver right here. I'll take this bit of blue tack off. Oh, there goes one of my batteries. It's looking a bit better. Now what we need to do, let's hook up the signal wire and also the ground wire to the flight controller. So I'm just going to plug in this little set of pins just here. So there we go. And on the receiver, all I'm going to do is I'm going to splice these together. So that's going to be the ground wires that run together. And I don't know why this wire is black as well. It'd be a lot more handy if that was white or something like that, because this is going to be the signal wire. So the one closest to the inside on the satellite receiver, this is the signal wire. The middle wire is the ground, and the outside is the 3 volt positive, but we've already hooked that up to the underneath 3 volt pad on the flight controller. So let's cut them and splice them together and put a little bit of heat shrink on and see how we go. Rightio, so there's our receiver all hooked up, and we would be good to go if we wanted to fly this thing non-FPV, but we just need to hook up our FPV and we'll be ready to burn around the house. Alright, and speaking of VTX, I'm actually excited, and I can't believe it, that I'm going to be using this. Now, this is the first VTX that I ever got. So this is about 10 quads or so ago, and to be honest, this one really bugs me, so I don't recommend this one at all. I hate its size, I hate its channel limitations and things like that. But one of the big selling points of the Owl is that it offers you so many customizable sort of options, and you can put so many different components and things like that in, depending on how you want to build it. And it does come with the Hawkeye VTX, which I definitely recommend because it's got a built-in pigtail and things like that. but I thought, why not? This is going to be an awesome opportunity to hook this up for my indoor flyer where the VTX doesn't matter quite as much because I'm not taking it to races or anything like that. So I'm going to try and build mine with this Fat Shark VTX. Now, if you have a Hawkeye or the one that comes with the kit from Flex RC, this is going to be so much simpler because it can actually fit inside this small little stack just here. But this is a bit bigger and it's going to hit the props and stuff when it goes to spin. So I'm going to try and find a way to use this. But if using the Hawkeye, the process would be much the same, if not a bit simpler. Anyway, we've already got our 12 volt power because that's what this Fat Shark VTX takes. But what I do need to do is connect it up to the camera that I'm going to be using. So let's talk about the camera as well. Alright, now the camera I'm using is this little one from Banggood, and this is a 170-degree camera, and that's going to mean I can see a lot more. The field of view is going to be a lot larger. And what I'm excited about, I think on this build, normally I don't do this, but this comes with a built-in microphone on the camera, so I'm going to give it a go and see what it sounds like with a bit of audio as well when I'm flying around. Alright, so we need to hook this up to our VTX. So you can see here, you've got a couple of pins, 5 volt out, that's going to be how we're going to power our camera, our ground and video in. They're pretty much all taken care of in here, but this plug won't go into here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get some old servo connections, splice this wires very much the same way, and then pin them into here. Alright, so I've got my little camera and I've just changed the plug on the ends and I've literally just direct soldered into something that's going to fit my VTX. Now yours might be different, but pretty much you might have some little pads or something on here, but pretty much just make sure your VTX and your camera are able to talk to each other like that. And that is it pretty much for soldering, and now we're just going to assemble the thing in the way that you see fit. So that's what I love about the Hour. There's so many options, but I'm going to see how mine is going to fit together with this big chunky VTX and things like that. And we'll also have to find a little placeholder. We might have to glue in an FPV camera, but that's part of the fun, kind of building this puzzle and seeing what it looks like. All right, I'm going to cut to the finalized shot and then I'll explain where I put each piece so you don't have to watch all this time of me moving things around. Woo! So here we are, and I know this is a pretty big jump, so I'm going to explain how I got this all together. Now yours might look a little bit different because right off the bat I had a lot of trouble trying to get my big old clunky VTX in here, so I had to actually use this top plate. Now if you were following along with this build and you had a nice little Onway or a Hawkeye VTX or something like that, you would have a heap of space in here, so your build would probably look a lot cleaner. Anyway, I'm going to explain how I put mine together and then we can get on with the build. So the first thing that I did, I put my little camera in the front here, and that was a little sort of Banggood camera, and I'll leave that in the description there. So I've got 170 degrees here, which is going to be great for flying around indoors because I'm going to be able to take a lot more in of my surroundings, and I'm going to be bouncing into a lot of things as well anyway. I've put my little Lemon RX satellite receiver on the very front, just behind my FPV camera, just here. Now the FPV camera is also mounted in a nice little bit of foam that I have. I've got it wedged between these two standoffs and then just a bit of duct tape around it. So I think that actually fits really, really nicely in there. I've got all my wires kept nice and secure so they don't actually get clipped by the props, because if you look here, there's not too much room if you've got any wire shenanigans running around in here. So make sure you keep your wires very neat and very tidy. Now because my VTX was a little bit weird, what I had to do, I ran this long pigtail out the back, and that's where I've got it sticking up the back just here. So that's why mine looks a little bit messy, but if you use one of those other smaller ones, I'm sure you could just run it straight from here, like a 90-degree pigtail straight into the back here. That would be much nicer. And then just to keep my wires tidy and things like that, I've actually just duct taped them down. So I've used a bit of duct tape in here to keep it nice and neat. What I need to do now, we're going to put some props on this bad boy, and we're also going to put on a little zip tie to keep the VTX in place and solder in our battery connector, and then we should be good to go. All right, let's keep going. So now we've got to decide what sort of XT connector you're going to put on the end here. Now I'm tossing up between a 30 and a 60 while I've been building this thing. And to be honest, I think I'm going to go with the XT60. Purely because the only XT30 batteries I've got are about 460 milliamp hours, and it's just a little bit too small. So I'm probably getting too short a flight time. So I'm going to go a heavier battery. And this thing will probably just be a little bit more docile. Still got plenty of power, but just a little bit more docile as it's floating around. But that's fine, especially because it's going to be an indoor flyer. So feel free to just use whatever sort of battery connector matches up with your batteries, but I'm going to be using an XT60. Alright, so I've got this all heat shrunk down just here, and I've got to say, I like the theme. I've got a sort of a black and yellow thing going on just here, and now it's time to put the props on. Now this bit could be a little bit confusing because it's not your, oh, my battery's charged. It's not your standard configuration sort of here because we're making a pusher quad. So the best way I can recommend it is, here's your motors, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Just put the props on so they're facing up the correct way, so you can actually read the writing as if they were on the normal part, and that's going to stop it with any confusion. So they're still going to be spinning the correct way as if it was normal, but when you flip it over upside down, it's going to look like they're all upside down and things like that. So put them on the correct way. So reverse for motor 1 and normal for motor 2. We've got here's our reverse for a normal for motor 3. Get that on there. And our reverse prop for motor 4. Alright, so we're going to screw those down and check out what she looks like. Alrighty, so here it is. I put the props on, and I got to say that made the build come to life for me. I mean, look how good this thing looks. I can't wait to see this thing flying around. This is the underside. I love the theme. I don't know how it worked out to be black and yellow, but that's how it turned out. Anyway, so the last thing I've got to do, I'm just going to sort of secure or zip tie down my battery lead wherever I want that to go. And it feels so weird, but I can actually put it out here on the arms, or I could run it up the front. I haven't yet decided. I think I'm probably going to put it out here on the arm actually, so I can mount my battery like that. But it doesn't matter too much because there's no way that it's going to fall inside the props, which is fantastic. So let's put it together. Oh, and I've also got to put my aerial on. So I'm going to zip tie that down, put some aerial on. We'll see how she looks, and then take it for a test flight. Alrighty, let's see how much this little beauty weighs, and she's coming in at 207 grams, and if I put an antenna on there, coming in at, don't know if you can see that there, it's 218 grams. So it's not as light as an Atom, but it does have bigger motors as well as this protection around the outside, so we'll have to see how she goes when she's flying. So there it is, there's my guide to how to build the ultimate indoor FPV quad, and I know you guys are going to have a blast flying this around because I'm loving flying mine around. I'm sort of rushing home so I can fly it around inside and get it outside a little bit as well. Anyway, I hope that really helped some of you people out there. Please leave a like or a comment if this video did help you. I'll leave you with some flight footage and subscribe for more FPV related content, and as always, happy flying! Anyway, check out, oh my god, this is when it gets weird. When I start talking to myself and I don't know what's going on and I start laughing, but check out this awesome color scheme I've got going on. This yellow and black, I'm rocking that pretty well. Anyway, I'm rambling. And you should definitely check out Flex RC because they've got a whole bunch of well-written guides on how to set up the owl. So ranging from like the F3 flight controller and how to get that up and working, and also binding your receiver and a whole bunch of things. That's really, really related to setting up this specific owl, so they did a great job. And also they were just total legends because I actually emailed them and asked if some of my viewers could get a discount and things like that, and they said if you enter UAVfutures in there, you can actually get a discount if you buy one of these frames or something like that. Anyway, I'll leave more info in the description about that. Anyway, happy flying!